After finally finishing Knights of the Old Republic for the first time, I knew I needed to jump straight into the sequel. I'd heard about how KOTOR 2 was darker, more complex and more philosophical, how it wasn't just a KOTOR 1 but bigger kind of sequel, but I never really understood what people meant by that. I knew Obsidian made it instead of BioWare, and I'd heard that they didn't have much time to finish it, which left me wondering, could it even live up to the first game? The first KOTOR was such a clean, self-contained package. It had that big Star Wars adventure and the kind of story that sweeps you up and keeps you enthralled. The idea of following it up with something slower, heavier or more ambiguous sounded risky, especially since a rushed development and cut content are basically common knowledge by now. But curiosity won, and I wanted to see for myself if this game was really the misunderstood masterpiece people claimed it was, or if it was just nostalgia talking. And after finally playing it all the way through, I can say without hesitation that KOTOR 2 isn't just a great sequel, it is, as people say, BioWare's unfinished Star Wars masterpiece. Hi, I'm Vindy, and today I'm going to be talking about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 The Sith Lords, and why I believe it's the pinnacle of Star Wars video games. If you do end up enjoying the video, be sure to leave a like, comment below what you think of KOTOR 2, and subscribe to see more. Released in late 2004 by Obsidian Entertainment, KOTOR 2 picks up about 5 years after the events of the first game. You play as the Exile, a Jedi who was cast out of the Order for fighting in the Mandalorian Wars. The war is now over, but the Jedi are scattered, the Sith are hunting them in the shadows, and the Republic is barely holding itself together. Right from the start, the tone is completely the opposite of the first game. In KOTOR 1, you start on the Endar Spire in the middle of chaos, with laser fire outside the windows and a clear sense of urgency. In KOTOR 2, the game doesn't open with a flashy space battle or a triumphant score. Instead, you wake up alone, injured and stripped of your connection to the Force on a mining station called Paragus. There's no fanfare, no rousing call to adventure, just a sterile, echoing facility filled with empty halls, malfunctioning droids, and a lot of questions. The urgency is still there, but the pace is slower and you can feel that something is clearly wrong. You're not immediately fighting Sith troopers. You're poking around in abandoned corridors, watching security footage, and piecing together a mystery. This is also where you meet your first companions, Atton Rand and Kreia. Neither of them come across as the instant best friend type you might expect from a traditional RPG. Atton's cagey, Kreia's cryptic, and both seem to be holding back far more than they reveal. Atton hides his past behind sarcasm and a perpetual air of casual disinterest, while Kreia speaks in riddles that always seem to have a sharp edge. There's an immediate sense that they're not here to simply follow your lead. They're here because they have their own reasons, their own goals, and you just happen to be a part of them. You're still too weak to really be the hero of the story just yet, and Paragus isn't trying to make you feel powerful. In fact, is actively doing the opposite. You're vulnerable, you're missing your Force connection, and you're not even sure you want to be a Jedi again. The game doesn't tell you if you should trust Kreia or if Atton is hiding something. It just lets those suspicions simmer. By the time you finally escape the station and end up on the Harbinger, only to be hunted by the chilling, silent figure of Darth Sion, the game has already made its point. This is not going to be the same kind of journey as last time. It's not about building a party to take down a clear villain. It's about surviving long enough to even figure out what your story is going to be. And when you finally get out of there and see the Ebon Hawk again, it's like a bridge between the two games. A little reminder of the past, even though you can already tell that this trip is going to take you down a very different road. If KOTOR 1 was about becoming the hero, then KOTOR 2 is about what happens when the hero's story is already over. The first game plays out like a classic Star Wars story. You start small, rise to greatness, uncover a huge twist about your identity, and then take that newfound power to reshape the galaxy. It's bright, it's adventurous, it's hopeful. Even on the dark side, it still feels like you're stepping into a myth. KOTOR 2 doesn't give you that. There's no prophecy, no chosen one, no save the galaxy mission statement right from the start. Instead, you're a broken figure, an outcast from the Jedi Order, waking up in a galaxy that's limping along after the wars have already ended. The Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, they've left scars everywhere, and not just on planets. People are exhausted, governments are unstable, and the idea of the Jedi's noble protectors is more myth than reality. You're not walking into a world that's ready for a hero. You're walking into a world that doesn't even trust one anymore. And that's the key difference. KOTOR 1 gives you a clear direction. You know who the enemy is, you know the stakes, you know what winning looks like. In KOTOR 2, winning isn't even clearly defined. You're not chasing Darth Malak or some ancient superweapon. You're trying to find the last surviving Jedi, to figure out why the Sith are still hunting them, and maybe, in the process, figure out whether the Jedi Order is even worth saving. The tone is more introspective and cynical. The Force isn't treated as an unquestionable mystical good, it's framed as something worth interrogating. Kreia, who we'll talk about more later on, constantly questions whether the Force is a blessing or a curse. Characters you meet talk about the Jedi as failures, as hypocrites and as manipulators. Your role as the Exile reinforces this theme. You're not just a Jedi who left during the war. You're someone who was cut off from the Force, and not entirely by choice. The game plays with the idea that you might be dangerous not because of your power, but because of the effect you have on those around you. Your presence changes people, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And that ripple effect is more central to the story than any single main quest objective. This is where KOTOR 2 starts feeling less like a Star Wars fairy tale and more like a meditation on war, ideology, and the cost of survival. It's about the aftermath, the part that stories usually skip over, and that's what really struck me playing these games back to back. In KOTOR 1, you finish your journey and the galaxy gets its big ending. In KOTOR 2, you walk in after the credits have rolled, and you're dealing with the hangover. The galaxy isn't neatly fixed, people aren't united, and the scars of war don't disappear just because the bad guy's gone. It's a darker story, but not in the edgy way that just means more violence or grittiness. It's darker because it's honest. It admits that heroism is complicated, that victory can be temporary, and that even the most noble causes leaves people behind. By the time you've been to a few planets, you start realizing the game isn't building toward one big showdown where everything gets tied up in a bow. It's about a galaxy in flux, and you're just one person trying to figure out your place in it. That in itself makes it stand apart from almost every other Star Wars story I've seen. Once you're free from Paragus and have the Ebon Hawk back under your control, KOTOR 2 opens up in a way that feels familiar to anyone who's played the first game. You've got a set of planets you can tackle in any order, each with its own self-contained story and set of choices, and each one feeding into the bigger mystery of the missing Jedi and the encroaching Sith threat. On paper, the structure mirrors KOTOR 1, but the tone of these planets is where the sequel really separates itself. In the first game, every location feels like part of an adventurous quest. Sure, there's danger and darkness, but there's always this underlying current of hope and progress. In KOTOR 2, the planets feel less like stepping stones to victory and more like individual case studies in how war has left the galaxy frayed, bitter, and unstable. The first stop after Paragus is Telos. It gives a real look at the Republic trying to stitch itself back together after the damage done to it by the Jedi Civil War. Citadel Station is this sterile, floating lifeboat propped up by bureaucracy, corporate contracts, and a lot of wishful thinking. You get pulled into the tug of war between the Ithorians, who genuinely want to heal the planet's surface, and Zerka, whose idea of reconstruction looks a lot like strip mining but with better PR. What I like about Telos is how mundane its stakes feel at first. Permits, supply shipments, habitat restoration. It's not glamorous, but it's where the galaxy either recovers or quietly collapses. Even the side paths, security work, corporate sabotage, playing mediator, push you into that murky zone where order, progress, and profit don't line up neatly. And then there's the polar region, where the tone shifts from civic paperwork to personal history. Icy, austere, and full of old resentments. Telos ends up feeling like a mission statement for the whole game. Institutions are fragile, motivations are mixed, and rebuilding is as political as it is hopeful. Dantooine in KOTOR 1 was this peaceful, pastoral world where you trained as a Jedi. It was serene, a place of learning, connection to the Force. Coming back in KOTOR 2 is almost a gut punch. The Jedi Enclave is gone, and all that remains is a burned out husk picked over by scavengers. The fields are scarred by the war, and the people here aren't idealistic farmers anymore. They're survivors, wary and hardened by what's happened. You're caught between rival factions trying to claim the planet's resources, and there's this constant sense that the right choice doesn't exist. No matter what you do, someone's going to lose. It's the perfect embodiment of KOTOR 2's grey morality. You can't just walk in, wave a lightsaber, and fix everything. Onderon is easily one of the more complex political setups in the game. You've got Queen Talia, who wants to maintain ties with the Republic, and General Vaklu, who's pushing for independence. Neither side is cartoonishly evil or purely noble. They both have valid points, and both are willing to get their hands dirty. Duxon, the Jungle Moon, is home to mercenaries, dangerous wildlife, and Mandalorian warriors who still cling to their warrior code in a galaxy that's moved on. Mandalorians here don't feel like faceless enemies from the last war. They're people trying to adapt without losing their identity. The Onderon-Duxon arc is a reminder that power struggles don't disappear when the big wars end. They just change shape. Korriban in the first game was the heart of the Sith Academy, full of apprentices scheming against each other, overseen by ruthless masters. In KOTOR 2, it's a graveyard. Silent, empty, stripped of life. The Academy is abandoned, the tombs stand untouched, and the only real presence is in the form of ghosts, visions, and lingering dark side energy. Exploring Korriban feels less like raiding an enemy stronghold and more like walking through the ruins of an ideology. It's eerie, melancholy, and a stark visual representation of the fact that even the Sith aren't immune to collapse. Nar Shaddaa is a crime-ridden moon where the Exchange, who are basically the galaxy's organised crime syndicate, runs everything. It's full of bounty hunters, slavers, and hustlers trying to make a credit any way that they can. On paper, this should have been a great setting, gritty and morally complex, perfect for KOTOR 2's tone. And to be fair, it is packed with content. The problem for me was the pacing. Nar Shaddaa feels long, and not just this is a big area long, but am I still on this planet long? There's a constant back and forth between zones, endless small errands to move the story forward, and so many side encounters is that the main thread feels buried under layers of busywork. It's not that the writing or scenarios are bad. In fact, there are some really strong moments here, like helping refugees survive or dealing with rival bounty hunters. But the sheer number of hoops you have to jump through to trigger the key story events makes it drag. By the time I was actually confronting the exchange and advancing to the big payoffs, I was more relieved than excited. And in a game that thrives on making you feel invested in its worlds, Nar Shaddaa was the one time I felt myself checking the clock. It's not a deal breaker. Every RPG has a zone that overstays its welcome, but it's the one planet I wouldn't be eager to revisit on a replay. Malachor 5 isn't just a final level. It's the galaxy's scar tissue made into a planet. The place where the mass shadow generated to reality, where the exile's defining choice turned into an echo that never stopped ringing. From the moment you arrive, everything feels wrong. Gravity, sound, even the way the terrain folds in on itself like broken metal. Mechanically, it's a gauntlet, hostile, relentless, and stripped of the cozy safety of the Ebonhawk. The Kreia Academy corridors feel like they're judging you with every step. But more than a challenge, Malachor is a confrontation. It's you versus the consequences of your past, the philosophies that shaped you, and the relationships you've bent and broken along the way. What I love about Malachor is that it refuses catharsis. There's no triumphant "we did it" swell. It's quiet, heavy, and reflective. Whether you walk out of there as a savior, a tyrant, or something unlabelable, Malachor makes you sit with the person you've become. Even with Nar Shaddaa's pacing issues, there's a unifying thread across all of these worlds. They're not just backdrops for quests, they're mirrors for the state of the galaxy. Each place isn't just about what happens here, it's about what does this mean for the galaxy. And in that way, traveling through them feels less like checking off objectives and more like piecing together a philosophical map of the post-Star Wars universe. One of the biggest strengths of KOTOR 2 is how it handles companions. In the first game, your crew was memorable and fun to travel with, but they were mostly static. Their personal arcs moved forward through conversation triggers, but your choices didn't radically change who they became. In KOTOR 2, Obsidian took that foundation and built something more reactive. Companions aren't just passengers on your adventure, they're mirrors, shaped by the things you say, the actions you take, and the way you treat them. That's where the influence system comes in. Instead of companions liking you or disliking you in a hidden affection score, they have an evolving level of influence that changes how much they trust you, how open they are with their past, and whether they'll take your teachings to heart. Get enough influence with someone and you might train them in the Force. Lose influence and they might distrust you, close off, or even turn against you later. It's subtle, but it changes the way you think about dialogue and decisions. Every choice isn't just about the galaxy, it's about the people standing next to you. So let's go through each of them one by one. Atton is the first crew member you meet. He feels like your standard smirking scoundrel archetype. A sarcastic pilot who cracks jokes and pretends not to care about anything deeper, but dig into his past and you find something much darker. He's not just running from the law, he's running from himself. Atton used to hunt Jedi for the Sith, and not in a casual bounty hunter way. His history with the Jedi is personal, full of guilt and self-loathing. If you gain his trust, you can coax that truth out of him, and it changes the entire way you see his character. If you push him far enough and earn enough influence, you can even train him as a Jedi, giving him his own personal redemption arc. Bao-Dur is a quiet Zabrak engineer and veteran of the Mandalorian Wars who served under you during the conflict. His calm demeanor hides deep scars, both physical and emotional. He's loyal, but that loyalty comes with weight. He helps you carry out the orders at Malachor 5, and that decision haunts him. Talking to Bao-Dur feels different than talking to someone like Atton. He doesn't give you big dramatic confessions, he just drops these small heavy truths that stick with you. And when you train him in the Force, it doesn't feel like just another gameplay perk, it feels like helping someone reconnect with a part of themselves that they buried. Mira is a bounty hunter, but with one very unusual rule. She doesn't kill. In a galaxy where violence is often the first option, that makes her stand out. She's practical, street smart, and knows exactly how to survive in places like Nar Shaddaa. Her moral code isn't the same as the Jedi's, but it's not incompatible either. If you earn her trust, you can train her as a Jedi, and watching her try to reconcile her rough upbringing with this new way of life is surprisingly compelling. Visas is one of the most striking companions in the game both visually and thematically. She's a Miraluka, a species that sees through the Force instead of with eyes, and she begins as a Sith assassin sent to help you. You spare her and she joins you instead, questioning everything she's been taught. Her loyalty isn't instant. She's torn between the teachings of her master Darth Nihilus and the new perspective that you offer. Every conversation with Visas feels weighty, like you're helping someone slowly unlearn years of indoctrination. She also gives you one of the game's most poetic looks of what the Force is, not as a weapon, but as a way of perceiving reality itself. The Handmaiden is a disciplined warrior from Aegis' Academy raised in a culture of strict training and emotional restraint. She's skeptical of you at first, partly because of your past and partly because of her loyalty to Atris. But the more influence you build, the more she opens up about her family, her mother, and the role she's been forced into. Training her as a Jedi isn't just about giving her lightsaber skills, it's about helping her reconcile her loyalty with her own sense of identity. Mandalore is a returning face from the first game, once known as Canderous Ordo, now carrying the title of Mandalore. He's a grizzled veteran who leads with blunt strength and battlefield experience, charging headfirst into danger while the others handle the finer work. His dry humour and war stories keep his presence sharp, always reminding you of the Mandalorian's long, violent legacy. The more influence you build with him, the more he reveals about the burden of leading a broken people and the responsibility of restoring the Mandalorians. Beneath the armour and blunt words is someone searching for meaning after a lifetime of endless war, trying to balance his warrior instincts with the heavy role of uniting his scattered clans. Everyone's favourite murderous droid is back, and he's just as much of a highlight as before. HK-47's brand of dark humour, calling people meatbags with complete sincerity, never gets old. This time around, you actually get to repair him piece by piece, uncovering more of his history and restoring his functionality. Whilst HK is largely comic relief, he does also offer some brutally honest and often hilariously twisted takes on morality and politics. T3 is the quiet MVP of the Ebon Hawk, still full of secrets, still handy with repairs, and surprisingly involved in the overarching plot. His loyalty is unquestionable, and while he doesn't get the moral deep debates of someone like Kreia, his presence is constant and comforting. KOTOR is a droid crime lord who believes in enforcing order at any cost, even if that order comes through manipulation, intimidation, or outright blackmail. He's unsettling, not just because of his cold logic, but because he represents a kind of law that's completely detached from morality. If you go down the dark side route, you get Han-Ha instead of Mira. Han-Ha is a brutal Wookiee slaver with a violent, almost feral demeanour. Han-Ha's loyalty is built on dominance and control, making him a perfect fit for a more ruthless playthrough. What makes all of these companions more than just side characters is how they respond to you. Influence isn't about picking the right answers to make them like you. It's about consistency. Sometimes gaining influence means agreeing with them, and sometimes it means challenging them in a way that they respect. It also makes the party feel alive. They'll comment on your choices in real time, argue with each other, and even change their worldview because of you. When you reach the endgame, the people by your side feel like your crew, shaped by your journey. Kreia is such an important and complex character that she needs her own section. Calling her just another companion feels almost insulting. Kreia isn't a side character. She isn't there to fill the wise mentor slot on the party roster. She is the game. She's the gravitational center around everything else orbits. Your actions, the story, even the way you think about Star Wars as a whole. When you first meet her, she's already surrounded by this air of mystery. She's calm, almost too calm considering the situation. She talks like she knows more about you than she should, and she never really answers a question directly. She's a former Jedi, or maybe a former Sith, or maybe both, or maybe neither, depending on how you look at it. And that's kind of the point. Kreia refuses to fit into neat little boxes. From the start, she positions herself not as your commander, but as your guide. And guide in this case doesn't mean telling you what's right. It means dragging you into uncomfortable questions, forcing you to confront your own assumptions, and sometimes straight up scolding you for making the obvious moral choice. There's one thing you'll learn about Kreia fast. She hates simplicity. If you help someone without thinking it through, she'll question whether you've actually doomed them to dependency. If you kill an enemy in anger, she'll press you on whether you've just created more suffering down the line. She doesn't care if you're light side or dark side, she cares about why. And that's what makes her so compelling. She isn't here to steer you toward good or evil. She's here to push you into the murky middle ground where intention and consequence get tangled. She wants you to think about how power works, what freedom costs, and what the Force itself might really be. Kreia's conversations are dense, but never in that boring lectury way that some RPG mentor characters fall into. They feel alive, personal. Sometimes she's generally teaching you something, sometimes she's manipulating you, and sometimes she's just testing to see how you'll react. There were moments where I found myself nodding along, agreeing with her completely, and then 10 minutes later being generally annoyed at her for what felt like cold-hearted logic. It's that push and pull that made me listen to every single thing she had to say. And in a game full of interesting characters, she's the one I felt I had to talk to after every big choice. I wanted to know what she thought, even when I knew it would make me second guess myself. And here's the thing, she's not some perfect all-knowing philosopher. She's deeply flawed, she's bitter, she's contradictory, she hides things from you, sometimes she's hypocritical, but that's what makes her feel real. Her relationship with the Exile feels unique compared to most RPG mentor-student pairings. She's not grooming you to replace her, or to fill some prophecy, or to fight in some inevitable final battle. She's interested in shaping how you see the world. If you defy her, she takes note. If you agree with her, she doesn't just pat you on the back. She's always working, always probing, always peeling back layers. By the time the credits rolled, I realized Kreia wasn't just a highlight of KOTOR 2, she's one of the most fascinating characters in the entire Star Wars universe. Not because she's flashy or powerful, but because she's a reminder that in a galaxy obsessed with light and dark, there's still space for questions that don't have an easy answer. Mechanically, KOTOR 2 sticks close to the foundation laid by the first game. It's still built on the D20 system adapted from Star Wars' tabletop RPG rules, with combat that's technically turn-based but presented in real time with a pause function. That means a lot of queuing up attacks, watching dice rolls play out under the hood, and juggling abilities for both yourself and your companions. The familiarity is a double-edged vibroblade. On one hand, if you played the first game, you can pick this up instantly. No learning curve, no confusion. You're just right back in that comfortable rhythm of pausing, planning, and unleashing force powers or special attacks. On the other hand, it does mean you're dealing with some of the same quirks from KOTOR 1, like occasional awkward pathfinding, enemies deciding to stand there and take hits instead of fighting back, and the occasional AI partner who thinks charging a pack of Sith alone is a brilliant strategy. While the core is the same, Obsidian did make small tweaks that help smooth out the experience. Inventory management feels a little more streamlined, and there's more variety in gear customization thanks to the workbench system. Crafting upgrades for lightsabers, blasters, and armor lets you actually tune your build to your playstyle instead of just swapping to whatever had the highest numbers. There's also a stronger emphasis on skill checks in dialogue and exploration. Skills like repair, persuade, awareness, and security get more moments to shine, which gives non-combat builds a little more purpose. It's satisfying to talk your way past a fight or to uncover a hidden stash just because you put points into awareness. One of the biggest additions is the prestige class system. After you've proven yourself as either a dedicated Jedi or a committed Sith, you can specialize further by becoming something like a Jedi Master or Sith Lord if you lean heavily into Force powers, or a Jedi Weapon Master or Sith Marauder if you want to be more combat focused. There's also hybrid options like the Jedi Watchman or Sith Assassin, which mix stealth and utility. These specializations don't just give you new titles, they grant mechanical bonuses and abilities that push your build in a specific direction. It adds a nice sense of progression, especially since KOTOR 1 didn't have the extra layer of character growth. The Force feels more flexible in KOTOR 2. You've got the classics from the first game, push, lightning, and heal, but there's also a bunch of new powers, including ones that fit the game's more morally grey tone. Powers like Force Confusion or Force Crush are as satisfying mechanically as they are thematically. The light and dark alignment still changes the way some powers function, with dark side abilities getting cheaper for Sith aligned characters and vice versa for Jedi. That means your alignment isn't just story flavour, it actually affects your mechanical efficiency as well. Because of the influence system and the ability to train multiple companions as Jedi, KOTOR 2 ends up giving you far more Force users in your party than the first game. This changes the feel of combat in the later stages. You can run with a team that's basically a mini Jedi Council, hurling lightsabers and spamming Force powers like it's going out of style. It's undeniably fun, but it can also make the mid to late game a little easy, especially once you've stacked defensive buffs and crowd control powers. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. KOTOR 2 is more about the story than brutal challenge, but it's worth noting that a well-built party can steamroll most encounters. This is where the game's age and rush development show the most. Enemy AI isn't exactly brilliant, and sometimes fights feel more like you're cleaning up than battling equals. Pausing and queuing actions is still the best way to control the chaos, but there are moments where the pacing dips because you're cutting through low-threat enemies. Still, when the game throws you into a big set-piece fight, the system still delivers that classic Star Wars energy. The beauty of the mechanics is that they're familiar enough to fade into the background. You're not here for flashy combat animations or deep min-maxing. You're here for the story, the characters and the choices. The gameplay is a steady, reliable foundation that keeps you engaged without pulling focus away from what KOTOR 2 does best. One of the biggest things that stood out to me in KOTOR 2 was how much my choices actually seemed to ripple through the game. In KOTOR 1, you definitely had choices, light side, dark side, and different dialogue paths, but there was still this feeling that the main beats were locked in place. With KOTOR 2, the influence system, combined with the game's more reactive writing, made it feel like I was constantly shaping the world and the people around me. And the influence mechanic is genius in how subtle it is. It's not just a be nice to companion equals they like you setup. Sometimes agreeing with someone gains influence. Other times disagreeing with them can still deepen your bond because they respect your conviction. It's less about saying the right thing and more about how consistent and impactful your choices are over time. What's even more interesting is that this influence isn't just for unlocking backstory. It can literally change who these people become. I'm talking about companions learning the ways of the Force, shifting their philosophies, or even turning against you depending on where your relationship stands. A character who starts out as a hardened skeptic can end up wielding a lightsaber by your side, while someone else might lose faith entirely if you push them too far. And this is where KOTOR 2 really blurs the line between light and dark. You can be a light side character who manipulates someone into following you, or a dark side character who genuinely saves a life for selfless reasons. It's not a morality meter with neat little boxes. It's messy, and that's the point. The game rarely steps in to tell you you did the right thing or you were evil. It just lets you act, and then forces you to live with the ripples. And I think that's why it stuck with me so much, because it's the kind of morality system that feels like it's actually about the people in your party and the galaxy around you, not just about ticking up a number on a hidden chart. There's no getting around it, KOTOR 2 is infamous for its rough edges. This isn't just the typical old game jank we laugh about years later. It's the kind of rushed development scars you can still feel even in the middle of an otherwise great game. The most obvious part is the bugs. Sometimes they're harmless, like an animation glitch or an NPC repeating the same line in the wrong context. Other times, they can actually break the flow, with quests bugging out or dialogue choices looping you in circles. It's never enough to make the game unplayable, but it's enough that you'll notice it, especially on your first playthrough. But the bigger conversation is the cut content. This is one of those rare games where we know, thanks to developer interviews and fan restorations, just how much was left on the cutting room floor. Entire dialogue sequences, expanded companion arcs, extra endings, even whole mechanical systems were either scrapped or left half implemented because the game had to ship before it was fully ready. The most infamous example is the ending itself. In the base game, it can feel a bit abrupt, almost like the story speeds up and then suddenly stops. A lot of the connective tissue between the last few planets and the finale just isn't there in the original release. And if you've played the restored content mod, it's like seeing a puzzle with more of its pieces filled in. You get extra dialogue, additional scenes on Malachor 5, and more closure for certain companions. It's worth saying though, that even with all of that missing, KOTOR 2 still manages to tell one of the most interesting and thematically rich stories in the Star Wars universe. The cut content doesn't erase what's there, it just makes you wonder how much stronger it could have been with another 6 months development. It's a reminder that game development is often a battle with time, budget and corporate deadlines. Obsidian was handed an enormous task and a tiny window to pull it off, and the fact that the game works as well as it does is almost a miracle. So with all that said, what do I actually think about KOTOR 2? First of all, it isn't a perfect game by any means, but in some ways that's exactly what makes it so special. It's messy and it doesn't always give you the clean answers you might expect from a Star Wars story, but that's the point. It's a game about broken people in a broken galaxy trying to figure out what the Force really means, when you strip away the myths and the neat moral labels. It takes the foundation of the first KOTOR and uses it to tell a completely different kind of story. Where the first game was about adventure, heroism and a galaxy-spanning mystery, the second is more introspective. It asks hard questions, forces you to challenge what you thought you knew about the Jedi and the Sith, and leaves space for you to interpret its answers or decide that there aren't any. Yes, the technical issues and cut content hold it back from being as polished as it could have been, but even with those flaws, KOTOR 2 delivers something that very few RPGs manage, a narrative that sticks with you long after you've put the controller down. For me, what really cements its place is the companions and the way your choices shape them. Watching these characters grow, fall, change, or even turn against you feels deeply personal in a way most RPGs only dream of. And then there's Kreia, one of the most complex, challenging, and unforgettable characters in any Star Wars story. In the years since its release, KOTOR 2 has become something of a cult classic. It might not have had the same immediate cultural explosion as the first game, but it's quietly earned a reputation as one of the smartest, most daring pieces of Star Wars storytelling ever told. It's flawed, it's brilliant, it's unfinished, it's unforgettable, and for me, that's KOTOR 2 in a nutshell. If you did end up enjoying this video, please be sure to leave a like to let me know, comment below what you think of KOTOR 2 and subscribe to see more. I'm Vindy, and this was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.